Hi, it's me Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. If you're new to the channel, then please subscribe my channel and visit my Patreon page, link in the description. The day dawned warm and clear, without a hint of cloud or breeze. The air was slightly cool with the promise of comfortable warmth in the afternoon. The sun was arching upward in its trek across the sky. The land was budding green, heralding an explosion of lush growth to come. In short, it was a wonderful spring day, just perfect for flying a rocket. Nora Spencer had anticipated this day all winter. She normally spent weekends working at her store, the Bear Market. But this day was special. She was taking two little girls out to the country to fly their first rockets. Maggie and Becky were proud of their creations, and rightly so. They had been built under the expert tutelage of Nora and Alice Murrin, and were anxious to see their little craft soar into the sky. Becky had built 2 rockets, and Maggie had built 3. All were painted and ready to lift off. Alice had also built some rockets while showing the girls how to construct them properly. And Nora had a few of her rockets of her own to fly. The day began at the Bear Market. Nora had hung a sign in the front door that read, "Store closed today, out to launch." Becky and Maggie paid the sign no heed as they entered the store they called Plushies and Wockets. The girls had actually outgrown baby talk, but Becky's little sister Kathleen gave the store its unofficial name, and in the minds of the girls it was carved in stone. "Hi, Aunt Nora," they called out in unison. "We're here." "Kathleen is helping Mommy go shopping," Becky said. Nora turned to see her 2 nieces run into the store, displaying the seemingly boundless energy of youth. "Well, hello, girls," she said. She could not help but smile at their enthusiasm. She remembered her own youth, a time when all the world was huge and every experience new. Now she was guiding 2 young ladies in their own new experience. "So are you ready to go fly some rockets?" "We are," they said as one. "When do we go?" "Just as soon as Alice and Doc Travis show up," she replied. And as though it were on cue, the front door opened with a cheery jingle as Alex entered. "Alex," said Nora, "I thought Alice was coming with us today." "She is," he answered. "I stopped at Bob's to pick up a cup of his special brew." He carried a gym bag in one hand and a styrofoam cup in the other. "Mind if I borrow your bathroom to change? It's a little cramped in there, but go ahead." "Thanks. I won't be a minute." Alex entered the small bathroom and closed the door behind him. Nora was a little bit embarrassed. "Girls, do you know about?" Maggie answered her question before it was finished. "It's okay, Aunt Nora. Uncle Alex is gonna drink some special coffee and turn into Aunt Alice. He does it every day." She spoke with the candor only an 8-year-old possessed. Nora was astonished. For her, blue crystal coffee was a marvel beyond imagination, but for Becky and Maggie it was just one more natural part of their accepted universe. It simply was. They accepted it, and that was that. The doorbell jingled once more as a tall, burly man entered. The girls recognized him immediately. "Doc," they called out in unison, running to greet the new arrival with hugs. Doc Travis, the neighborhood physician, scooped up both girls in his strong arms and lifted them up off the floor. "Well, look who's here. If it isn't Becky and Maggie. How you little ladies doing today?" He was rewarded with 2 incredible hugs. Doc loved kids, even though he and his wife, Nancy, had none of their own. Nancy was a pediatrician, and together they had a practice in the neighborhood. Their office was decorated with Grateful Dead tour posters, all tastefully framed, and they lived in an apartment just above their office with their cat, Cosmic Charlie, and their dog, Casey Jones. "Glad you could join us, Doc," said Nora. Doc set down the 2 girls and took Nora's outstretched hand, making a big production out of bowing and kissing it. How could I resist such a gracious invitation from so fair a lady? Especially when it involves flying rockets. Just then Alice emerged from the bathroom. She was physically a little smaller than her alter ego Alex, and her skin tone was a bit darker, suggesting an Hispanic heritage, whereas Alex was about as white as they get with a complexion on the pasty side of a tan. "Hello, Doc," Alice said. "Nice to see you." "Good to see you too," Alice said. "Document. But why Alice?" "I thought this was your day off." "I thought you only became Alice for the extra tips you got waiting tables at Bob's Cafe." "Oh," she said, I just thought it would be better if we made this a girls' outing. I think it's important for Maggie and Becky to see women doing technical things like rockets. So that's why you always transformed before you showed them how to build? Too right, she said. I don't like to see young girls get brainwashed into playing dumb just because they are girls. And it's really not just an excuse to spend more time as Alice? Well, she stammered, blushing, Now come on, Doc, said Nora, rising to Alice's defense. What's wrong with Alex wanting to spend some Alice time with the girls? Besides, you're not exactly inexperienced with Blue Crystal coffee. You've enjoyed a cup yourself. Only once, said Document. Nancy and I each drank a cup to help celebrate our 10th anniversary. And how did it go? Alice asked. Doc just grinned. Come on, Aunt Nora, said Maggie. We want to go fly our rockets. All right, girls, let's get going. Doc, did you bring your stuff? I have it in my truck. Should I follow you? No, there's enough room in the van. Why don't you load your stuff up and ride with us? Sounds sweet to me. I get the company of all these pretty ladies, especially the cute little ones. That always made Becky and Maggie giggle. They all piled into Nora's camper van to drive to the country. Their destination was a dairy farm. The farm was located in a county proud of its rural status and anxious to preserve its open space. Zoning laws fairly well precluded the onslaught of suburban sprawl. This particular farmer felt an obligation to give something back to his community, and so he made the land available to hunters, school children, and some model rocket enthusiasts. Nora learned of his generosity from a fellow hobbyist and secured permission to fly on his land. Maggie and Becky were excited, watching the roadside transform from the urban sidewalks they were familiar with to the more bucolic surroundings of the country. They were in awe of the herds of cows they observed as the farms passed by. Look, Aunt Nora, said an animated Becky, there's cows everywhere. I see them too, Aunt Nora, young Maggie chimed in. Look, those cows are brown, and there's some black ones, and there's some with spots. Goodness, said Nora, you would think these girls have never seen cows before. They probably haven't, said Alice. They grew up in the city, and the only place they ever see milk is in plastic jugs. Nora slowed down and turned into the road. It ran along behind the farmhouse and between the barn and several silos, winding beside fields of freshly planted alfalfa. They parked on a grassy area next to an open field. The doors of the camper opened, and the company piled out. Immediately they were greeted with the earthy, musky smell of a farm. The girls reacted predictably. Ew, said Maggie. What's that smell? That's just the cows, ladies, Doc said. The farmer keeps the cows' droppings, and he spreads it out on the field to make the alfalfa grow. So watch where you step. Don't worry about the cow pies, girls, said Nora. They're already in the soil fertilizing the alfalfa. The smell is from fresh manure, and that's kept in the barn. Just stay away from the pasture, and you should be fine. Nora, Doc, and Alice unloaded the equipment from the back of the camper and set up the launch pads. Doc had brought 2 pads with him built from PVC pipe. Nora had made her pad from an old camera tripod. Alice had a smaller commercial pad. The pads were set in a line about 40 feet from the camper and 5 feet apart from each other. Wires were run from each pad to a table that sat about 30 feet from each pad. The wires all connected to control panels and were hooked to batteries. Doc had a motorcycle battery powering his 2 controllers, while Nora and Alice used gel cell batteries. Remember, girls, said Nora to Maggie and Becky, safety is important. Don't go to the pad unless I say you can, and whenever we arm the launchers you have to stay here at the table. And we don't run after the rocket until I give the all clear. You understand? We understand, Aunt Nora, Becky answered for the 2 of them. Good. Well, let's prep your rockets for launch. Maggie had painted her first rocket orange to match the fur of her plush kitten, Pixel. Becky had painted hers pink and decorated it with stickers. They were the cutest little rockets Nora had ever seen. Doc had a rocket with raked fins and a very futuristic appearance. What's that, Doc? Asked Alice, who was prepping a Big Bertha. That's a classic Centauri Laser X clone. I found the plans on the web. Motors were loaded and igniters installed. Parachutes were checked double-checked. The rockets were placed over the guide rods on the pads, and the igniter leads were hooked up. Then the daring rocketeers returned to the launch control table. "Maggie," said Nora, "you're my range safety officer. Do you see any aircraft in the sky?" Maggie scanned the heavens, taking her role seriously. "No aircraft, Aunt Nora." "Good. Pad 1 is armed. We're launching Becky's pink rocket. Countdown. 5-4-3-2-1. Launch." Nora pressed the launch button. Out on Pad 1, a hiss emerged from Becky's model, which then leaped into the sky on a column of smoke and fire. The thrust lasted for less than a second, but that was all it took to get to a speed of about 300 miles an hour. The little rocket then coasted on the speed it had built up, slowing down as it trailed tracking smoke. Then, as it dwindled into a dot, it arced over and began to return to Earth. But before it could fall very far, a gentle pop sounded. The ejection charge pushed the small parachute out of the airframe tube, and Becky's rocket settled slowly and gently to the ground, finally landing about 20 feet from the pad. "Nice flight, Becky," said Nora. "Okay, Maggie, it's your turn. Is the sky clear?" Maggie made a quick scan of the sky. "All clear, Aunt Nora. But Pixel wants to launch her rocket for herself." "Oh, she does now?" Nora said. "Yes, she told me so," said Maggie. "Can she launch it? Please?" "Of course she can," said Nora. She placed the plush kitten's paw on the launch button. "All right, Pixel. Countdown. 5-4-3-2-1. Launch." Now the orange rocket rose from the pad, trailing smoke and fire. Becky and Maggie cheered as the tiny model coasted into the sky, finally popping out its chute and settling gently to Earth. In a similar manner, Alice's Big Bertha and Doc's Laser X lifted off. Nora removed the arming keys from the control panels and gave permission to Maggie and Becky to retrieve their rockets. Doc walked out to the field with them, picking up Alice's rocket for her. He showed the girls how to stow the parachutes back into the body tubes, making it easier to carry them back. Nora was busy prepping a rocket of her own. Maggie looked at it curiously. "What's that rocket, Aunt Nora?" "It's a scale model, Maggie," she replied. "This is a Mercury Redstone, like the one that took Alan Shepard into space. He was the first American to fly in space." "So he was the first man in space?" she asked. "No. The first person in space was a Russian cosmonaut, Yuri Gagarin. Shepard was the second person who flew in space." "Wow! Did Yuri fly in a rocket like that?" "No, he flew in a much different kind of rocket called the Vostok. It was actually much bigger than this." "But not as big as this one, little kitten," said Doc, bringing out another model. "This is a Saturn V. This was the rocket that took us to the moon." Maggie's green eyes widened in amazement at the model Doc Travis had brought out. It was almost as tall as she was. She almost forgot to prep her own rocket until Alice reminded her to get it ready. 4 more rockets were put on the pads, and 4 more sailed skyward. This pattern repeated over the next few hours, with everybody flying different models. Finally, it was time to go home. Nora, Alice, and Doc went about the task of disassembling the launch pads and wrapping up the control wires. It had been a busy day. Maggie was at Nora's side, helping her put the equipment away. She could not help but notice a little tear make its way down Nora's face. "Aunt Nora," she asked, "what's wrong?" "I thought you liked flying rockets." Nora wiped away the tear. "Oh, I do love them. It's just that I was thinking about when I was younger." "You mean when you were little?" "Yes, when I was little. It was right in the middle of the space race, when everybody was talking about going to the moon. My heroes were the Mercury astronauts, and I wanted to go into space just like them. I wanted to be an astronaut." "Did you try to be an astronaut, Aunt Nora?" "Oh, yes, I tried. I did everything I could to get into the Air Force Academy. I didn't make it, but I managed to get into ROTC. That was my ticket to pilot training, and I hoped into space." She left unvoiced the fact that she had been male back then, before Blue Crystal Coffee turned her permanently into a woman. "Did you know I was a test pilot, Maggie?" she asked. "Really? Wow! Did you fly jets?" "I sure did. I got to try out all of the new jets and the experimental aircraft. But I never could get into the space program." Nora sighed. By the time I could apply, the Apollo program was winding down, and the space shuttle was just a dream. It would be many years before we would need new astronauts, and I was caught in the middle. So I never got my shot at flying in space. Eventually, they cut back on the X-Plane's budget, so they didn't need as many test pilots. That was when my life took a different path. Nora's mind wandered to her fateful meeting with a recruiter for America's most covert agency, and how she started her new career as a special agent protecting transgendered persons vital to America's security. It was an exciting life, and she had no regrets, save one. In the silence, Maggie said something profound. "Aunt Nora, do you think I could go to space someday?" Nora looked at the little red-haired girl with the piercing green eyes. "You know something? I believe you just might." Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access.